Published 2140 EDT, the 2nd of November 2017. Updated 2156 EDT, the 2nd of November 2017. There was always going to be more to it. And so it turned out. Michael Fallon had to resign not over a minor 15-year-old indiscretion, but because he'd made a drunken pass at a fellow cabinet member. His nemesis was Leader of the House Andrea Leadsom, who complained to the Prime Minister that he'd behaved inappropriately towards her several years ago. What was that about revenge being a dish best served cold? Fallon initially said he'd stood down as Defense Secretary because his behavior had fallen below the high standards we require from members of our armed forces. That never rang entirely true. If all he did was touch a woman's knee at a lunch, as we were first told, I'd have thought his behavior fell well above the standards we have come to expect from members of our armed forces. Barely a week goes by without fresh revelations of frigging in the rigging and hanky-panky in the ranks. If non-consensual knee contact is now regarded as a court-martial offense, there would not be a warship left afloat, nor a fighter jet in the sky, and most of our SOLRS would be banged up in the crimes wing of the glass house. For instance, over the past couple of weeks we've been bombarded with salacious stories about serial shenanigans among the crew of one of our nuclear submarines, HMS Vigilant. They read like a script for Carry On Up the Conning Tower and resulted in the captain being relieved of his command. Stop sniggering at the back. That's a technical term, not a punchline. His number 2 was also forced to walk the plank for UAL misconduct. 4 officers were disciplined for affairs with members of the crew and 9 submariners were sacked after they tested positive for cocaine. It fell to the then Defense Secretary to take firm action. Michael Fallon, for it was he is reported to have given the First Sea Lord, Sir Philip Jones, a roasting. Presumably, though, not in the sense we have come to associate with philandering professional footballers. Fallon wasn't to know when he adopted his high moral tone with the Navy that within 72 hours, he himself would be the one being keel-hauled. It would take a heart of oak not to laugh. So Michael Fallon, shown on Wednesday, left was forced to quit following a complaint from cabinet colleague Andrea Leadsom right about his behavior towards her. It emerged Fallon turns all Jekyll and Hyde in drink by all accounts. So it was no great surprise to discover that not only does he consider himself some kind of god, he also fancied himself as a future prime minister. Mind you, don't they all? I'm also curious about the motive behind the timing of the knee-grabbing revelation. Julia Hartley-Brewer, the journalist on the receiving end, said she thinks it was no big deal and Fallon shouldn't have had to resign over it, unless he'd done something more serious. Now we know he had. All over Westminster, there is the of old scores being settled and self-styled feminists on the make exploiting the situation to raise their own political profiles. Me too, me too, me too. Look, before the usual suspects start bouncing up and down, I'm not trying to belittle genuine allegations of serious UAL assault, which should be a matter for the police. The worst aspect of the feeding frenzy over Fallon is that a credible claim by a Labour activist, who has waived her anonymity to allege that she was raped by a senior Labour Party official, seems to have been brushed aside in pursuit of a terminal Tory sleaze tsunami. Julia Hartley-Brewer was the journalist at the centre of the Michael Fallon scandal. My point is simply that this latest outbreak of madness was utterly predictable. I told you after the Harvey Weinstein scandal broke that the Westminster political class would be gagging to get in on the act. Never underestimate their capacity to make everything about them. Since then we've been subjected to endless and fury over a whole variety of transgressions, from a minister sending out his secretary to buy toys to some self-promoting dopey bird in a corset trying to destroy the career of an old family friend who didn't make a pass at her. We've had the now infamous spreadsheet of shame containing unsubstantiated, anonymous allegations of bad behavior by MPs, compiled by, well, no one seems to have any idea. That hasn't stopped every single spit and cough being circulated on the internet and subsequently dissected as if they were proven facts chiseled in stone. Whatever happened to the presumption of innocence? Politicians who want to SLE the free press are more than happy to join in trial by unregulated social media. The accused are declared guilty without even knowing who their accusers are. What we're dealing with, in most cases, is malicious gossip masquerading as hard evidence. Admittedly, some of these claims are absolutely hilarious. I particularly enjoyed the minister who is supposed to make his subordinates vacuum the carpet in their underwear while wearing women's perfume. I think that's right. And I didn't know that female Minister X had been enjoying a bit of extracurricular rumpy-pumpy with a fellow Tory MP. If it's true, and she hasn't denied it, you can't help wondering why she looks so miserable all the time. Nor did I know that the same MP had also been squiring another female minister. That might not be true, either, since tittle-tattle is being conflated with proof of serious wrongdoing. What's undeniable is that some men abuse their positions of power to coerce favors from female subordinates. Mr. Fallon, MP for Sevenoaks, is pictured during Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, sitting on the front bench for the final time. It's also true that some women are not averse to using their wiles to their own advantage. Lines get blurred. On HMS Vigilant, the captain and some of his senior officers overstepped the mark and had to be dealt with for breaches of military discipline. But, cocaine snorting aside, what else did the Ministry of Defense expect when they insisted on fit young men and women serving alongside each other in a confined space for months on end? The same goes for Westminster, as insular an institution as any nuclear submarine. Men and women of differing status are thrown together, awash on a sea of subsidized alcohol, with inevitable consequences. That doesn't excuse genuine bad behavior. But, for heaven's sake, can we stop getting everything out of proportion? Is it too much to hope that the political class grows up and stops behaving like a cross between a Melville Torchlight lynch mob and a bunch of soppy schoolgirls bitching away on social media? What we've seen at Westminster this week is life imitating Twitter, lurid allegations presented as gospel and posturing politicians queuing up to parade their virtue. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has been preoccupied with this nonsense and forced into a cabinet reshuffle, when she should be concentrating on the biggest political challenge of the past 50 years, getting us out of the EU in one piece. Never mind carry on up the conning tower, it's time to bring down the curtain on the longest-running farce in town, carry on up the Commons. Prince Charles has been photographed in Singapore with something called a V8 Absolute, which turns out to be a vacuum cleaner. Funny, I always thought V8 and Absolute were essential ingredients for a perfect Bloody Mary. Sweeney Goes to Hollywood. Look back, and Amber could have been reading from this column when she told the old Bill to stop bleating about the cuts and concentrate on nicking a few villains. While she was at it, the Home Secretary might have insisted they cease wasting a fortune on high-profile investigations that are going nowhere. It's not just the political class which has rode in on the Harvey Weinstein scandal. I predicted a couple of weeks ago that Scotland Yard would get involved, even though there was zero chance a film producer would ever stand trial or serve time in Britain. Lo, this week, it came to pass. The Yard announced it was setting up a special Weinstein squad, called Operation Kagayak. Apparently, Kagayak is the name of a volcano in Alaska. Why not just call it Operation We're All Off to Hollywood on expenses? The death of Derek Red Robbo Robinson, former Communist Union convener at British Leyland, brought back a few memories. For a couple of years in the mid to late 70s I was the industrial correspondent of the Birmingham Evening Mail, reporting on the anarchy Robinson wreaked upon the motor industry. Robbo made it to 90, which is more than can be said for British Leyland, the nationalised conglomerate he pretty much helped strangle at birth with a plague of strikes and goslows. Longbridge BL's biggest plant was more of a museum than a car factory, a byword for overmanning, restrictive practices and clapped-out machinery. So much so that when Fiat launched a new vehicle made on an entirely automated production line, I got my hands on their proposed advertising campaign, Fiat Strada. The slogan proclaimed, "Hand-built by robots, not by robos."